So it's been quite an eventful past couple of weeks in the world of professional wrestling. AEW had the audacity to run two pay-per-views in 1 week, All In and then All Out. And then WWE ran their Payback pay-per-view just last weekend. And of course, the elephant in the room, the big story of the week, the one everybody's been talking about, CM Punk being fired by AEW. I believe this is the second time he was let go due to a backstage incident that he had with Jack Perry. Now, granted, the last time CM Punk was fired, he got into an altercation with, I believe, Kenny Omega. But the second time around, it was with Jack Perry, formerly known as Jungle Boy, backstage. And apparently the issue started when Punk expressed that he did not want Jack Perry to use real glass in one of the matches. I believe the match in which, at the 0 hour for All In which Perry went through like the windshield of a car, Punk expressed that he did not want Jack Perry to use real glass, I guess because he didn't want there to be any possibility of them getting hurt. And then on an episode of Collision, Jack Perry looked at the camera and said it was real glass or something like that. And in the pre-show of All In, just before Punk was set to go out against Samoa Joe, Punk and Jack Perry had some sort of an altercation where they actually legitimately got into a fist fight, and it was broken up, and then Punk went out immediately afterwards and wrestled Samoa Joe. But despite everything that has occurred, CM Punk has been released by AEW. A lot of people have conflicting opinions about this. Some people think it was deserved, and some people think that Punk shouldn't have been released. To tell you the truth, Punk is basically a troublemaker. Now, I'm not going to sit there and say that he did do this and that he did deserve to be fired, but, I mean, Punk isn't necessarily the good guy that we like to paint him as being. But as I said, you know, I wasn't really there, so I can't really give much of an opinion on it. But either way, regardless of what we think, he's been released by AEW. Switching to the women's division now, there was a Fatal 4-Way match at All In London. It was a Fatal 4-Way between the champion Hikaru Shida, Toni Storm, Dr. Britt Baker, and Saraya, who was formerly known as Paige. I'd imagine the original plan was for Jamie Hayter to win the championship back from Toni Storm, but due to her injury, that was unable to happen. Now, Jamie Hayter is from England, so, you know, she's got the hometown crowd. But as I said, due to her injury, she was unable to wrestle and compete at that show. So instead, they decided to give the belt back to Hikaru Shida, and she became the two-time women's champion, only for her to lose it just a month after defeating Toni Storm for it at All In. Saraya is the new AEW Women's Champion. She gets a win in front of her hometown crowd. And as I said, you know, the original plan was for Hayter to win, but Saraya is good enough, I guess, because she's got the home crowd advantage. I would really prefer if, you know, if the original plan was for Saraya to win, I would have preferred for Toni to maintain the title and then have Saraya defeat her for it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm glad Shida is a two-time champion, but the idea of having Shida win only for her to drop the belt a month later, it just kind of seemed like a bit of a waste of time, unless they just wanted to pad out Shida's resume a little bit, because as we know, AEW's women's division is quite controversial, perhaps for the right reasons, because it seems as if Tony Khan just really doesn't care about the women's division, particularly with the Thunder Rosa stuff that happened relatively recently. Also at All In, we saw FTR successfully retain their tag team championships against the Young Bucks, despite Cash Wheeler's legal trouble that he's going through right now for armed robbery or whatever it was. They retained the titles. We all fully expected the Young Bucks to defeat FTR, but alas, the FTR retained their titles, and I guess Khan is going to keep them champions, at least for the time being. And then FTR would then go on to successfully defend their titles again at All Out just a week later, which I thought was quite interesting. I mean, obviously, as I said, I thought that they would drop the belts due to Cash's legal troubles, but who knows where the tag team division is going to go from now on. Another thing I would like to talk about that's related to AEW is basically the MJF Adam Cole thing. Obviously, MJF is one of the absolute best heels in the business right now. I would say he's probably the number one heel in general. Maybe Dominic Mysterio's up there. But MJF is absolutely a great heel. And he plays that really big, tough guy persona really well. And him and Adam Cole have had such an interesting relationship with each other. Like, they're currently the Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions, but then they faced off against each other in the main event of All In for the AEW Championship. And those two guys work so well together. They're both fantastic talents. And I'm really hoping that MJF's title reign can last as long as it can. I'm not talking about Roman Reigns 3 years champion type things, but honestly, when it comes to the AEW title, it really doesn't seem as if MJF has any competition. We thought that maybe it would be Punk, maybe Moxley, but it's like, who's next in terms of the world championship picture? I mean, I really couldn't tell you. It's just like MJF doesn't really have anybody to feud against, but I think the Adam Cole stuff is really great too. And speaking of rivalries, I think have a lot of potential. Konosuke Takashita and Kenny Omega. I think that rivalry could also have a lot of really great stuff involved in it as well. I mean, they went like 30 minutes at All Out, which I thought was great. That was in Chicago, Illinois. And speaking of All Out, one more thing. This is related to CM Punk. Chicago was the site, I think the United Center is where the Chicago Bulls play, if I'm not mistaken. That was the venue that hosted All Out, an AEW show. And as soon as Tony Khan announced that Punk would no longer be a part of AEW, a lot of people apparently left this venue and stuff like that. And obviously, now that Punk is gone, I would imagine AEW are going to lose some money, especially because Punk was like their number one merchandise a seller, I guess. Everybody loved Punk, and he was often seen as the hero of professional wrestling for a while, but I'm not going to necessarily say it was a good or a bad decision to release Punk. What's done is done. But obviously, Punk was the top guy in AEW, so much so to the point where they even gave him his own show, which is Collision, which I believe is Bryan Danielson's show now. But, they brought him back, and they really hyped him up. They put him in a really great feud with MJF. And then they gave him his own show, only for him to get into more trouble, and he was dismissed. But that's the big story that's been going on, and, a lot of discourse has happened on the internet about this in the wrestling community. I'm not necessarily sure what side I'm on. Like, some people defend CM Punk. Some people say, Punk was a troublemaker. I combined trouble and punk. Like I said, trunk. Anyway, some people say that Punk is a troublemaker. Some people say that no, AEW is just being really unfair to him. I don't want to get involved in that stuff because, I do like Punk. He was one of my heroes when I was younger, but maybe he is a bit of an instigator. I mean, But regardless, I digress. I guess we'll go over to WWE now. Of course, WWE had their Payback show this past week, and the most surprising result of all was Judgment Day becoming the new tag team champions. I certainly did not expect that at all. The Judgment Day, which is Finn Balor and Damian Priest, who is still Mr. Money in the Bank, defeated Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn in a Pittsburgh street fight match, something like that. Of course, Kevin and Sami had the Pittsburgh Penguins jerseys, and they had the terrible towels that the Steelers had. But it was a great match. Payback was a good show. I mean, let's be real here. All three shows, All In, All Out, Payback, all those shows were great. But for Payback, it was like the Judgment Day became the new tag team champion. So now Rhea Ripley is the women's champion. Then you have Damian Priest and Finn Balor, the tag team champions. Damian Priest is also Senior Money in the Bank. And then you have the North American champion, Dominic Mysterio. I fully expect that Damian Priest will cash in his Money in the Bank, probably on Seth Rollins, and I'd imagine he would win. I really do. I think Damian Priest is going to cash in and win on Seth Rollins. Now, I can jokingly say as much as I want that, oh, he's going to cash in on Roman and he's going to win. But he's not going to do that. Like, let's be real here. They're going to protect Roman as much as they can. I mean, I said that they only introduced the World Heavyweight Championship just so they could give the Royal Rumble winner somebody to go after whose name isn't Roman, right? I don't know if they're going to give the big Cody Rhodes, Roman Reigns rematch at WrestleMania 40 next year in Philadelphia, but, I think that eventually Damian will cash in and win against Seth Rollins. I really don't know what they're going to do. Maybe they'll do some, WrestleMania cash-in stuff, where he cashes in on Seth or something, but who's to say for sure? But speaking of Money in the Bank, Io Sky, who was Miss Money in the Bank, cashed in and defeated, technically it was Bianca Belair, and won the Women's Championship. And I think Io Sky and Asuka should just have a one-on-one match sometime. One of these days. I was thinking that maybe they would do it at WrestleMania, like Io Sky versus Asuka. I'm biased because Asuka's my favorite. I was thinking that maybe Asuka would win the Royal Rumble and then she gets a rematch against Io. Because obviously Rhea is, the women's world champion, and Io is the women's champion because, you have to have 2 women's belts, despite the fact that Io's championship says undisputed, but it's not really disputed if there's 2 champions now, is it? I don't know what they're going to do, but in 2 weeks on SmackDown, Io and Asuka are going to have a one-on-one match to determine who's going to become the new women's champion. Or maybe not new, but she defends her belt against Asuka, which just kind of seems like a wasted opportunity. I'm fully expecting something about Bianca Belair or Charlotte running in and interfering and costing Asuka the match or whatever. But who knows? Maybe Asuka will win the Royal Rumble and maybe Io will hold on to the belt at least until WrestleMania. Who's to say for sure? And speaking of, we have the Usos. We have Jimmy and Jey Uso. Jimmy on SmackDown. I believe Jey is on Raw now. And this is going to be setting up Jimmy versus Jey at WrestleMania. That's fully what I'm expecting. I still think Cody is going to be facing off against Roman at WrestleMania, but I don't know for sure. It doesn't really seem like anybody's going to even have the capability of touching Roman anytime soon. But I certainly suspect that it's going to be Cody Rhodes again. I'm not going to say LA Knight. I think LA Knight's going to win the Rumble next year. I mean, these are way, way too early predictions, but I mean, let's be real here. In terms of predictions, back in January, I predicted that Shotzi was going to win the Money in the Bank. I was way, way, way off on that one. I still really like Shotzi, but I was way off, I'll defend Shotzi till the day I'm dead, by the way. I defend Shotzi a lot. But as you know, wrestling is a very unpredictable business. There are no guarantees in wrestling. Roman Reigns could break his hip or something crazy like that, and then guess what? He has to forfeit the title. But who's to say for sure? But professional wrestling is the coolest thing on earth. Hell yeah. And lastly, the final topic I wanted to discuss was Chris Statlander. She is currently the TBS champion. Early this year, she defeated Jade Cargill to become the TBS champion. Jade had this big undefeated streak, issued an open challenge. Statlander returned from injury, defeated Jade, and became the TBS champion. And Statlander has been defending her title on a frequent basis ever since. She actually defends her title, unlike Roman. Anyway, all joking aside, and I use the term joking very loosely in that instance, Statlander is like my second favorite. Sheeta is my favorite right now in AEW, but Statlander is my second favorite. Unfortunately, she doesn't have her alien gimmick anymore, but oh well, a man can dream. She faced off against Ruby Soho at All Out to defend her TBS title. Originally, she was going to be wrestling at All In. Something happened, something or another, I'm not too sure. She wasn't able to make the show, but she did wrestle Ruby Soho at All Out. And then Toni Storm, with her 50s Hollywood golden era gimmick, came in and interfered, and Statlander was able to retain the title. Statlander has done really, really great things as TBS champion, and I said earlier this year that I was convinced that Statlander would become the women's champion. But TBS isn't bad. I'm about to contradict myself here, but there's one last thing I'd like to say, even though I said the last thing would be the final one. The match between Orange Cassidy and Jon Moxley for the International Championship, it was a fantastic match at All Out. It was the main event of the show, and plus Cassidy kicked out of the Death Rider, which hardly ever happens. It was a great match. Both wrestlers put into their strength very well. It was a great, grueling contest, and you almost believed that Orange Cassidy could do it. But Moxley becoming the new international champion is really, really sweet. And it was just a great match, and I really applaud Orange Cassidy and Moxley for putting on such a great match, even though you think Moxley would just absolutely annihilate Orange Cassidy. And that's all I've got to say about the world of professional wrestling right now.